Our guest today is Dr. Theresa Lyons, the founder of Navigating Autism, an organization that focuses on helping families navigate autism.
Let's see. So a little bit about me is I have a PhD in computational chemistry from Yale.
Computational chemistry is using computer simulations to solve chemical problems.
I love chemistry. I've always loved science.
And one thing about Dr. Lyons is she loves to geek out about science.
I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, first as a research chemist and then on the business side. So really understanding healthcare from many different aspects.
When she got to the business side, she got to experience many different aspects of the healthcare industry that a chemist normally isn't exposed to.
How do you market a drug, and how do you then build teams with doctors, and just all of that most chemists are usually not exposed to. And then my daughter was diagnosed with autism when she was 3.5. And I fortunately had all these skills of understanding, chemistry and drug design and R&D. And then also, how do you assemble a team? How do you look at guidelines for different therapeutic areas? How do you make decisions? And the unfortunate thing is with autism, when I asked, okay, now what? There really was not a good answer.
We found Dr. Lyons' story compelling because she uses the skill of listening to really try to figure out and understand what's going on with her daughter, what's going on with autism, and where we're at with research today. Her work has helped thousands of families around the world, and you'll really want to hear what she has to say. Stay tuned. From conversations to the natural world to complete silence, so many of us focus on what's next rather than what is happening now. I'm Listening is a podcast that dissects the importance of listening.
This is I'm Listening, a podcast simply about the skill of listening. This is fascinating to me because this was, 10, 12 years ago, 2013, is that accurate?
Yep, 2013, correct.
That wasn't that long ago.
No.
In the grand scheme of things. So you have this new information now for you and your family. Reading through your story a little bit, you start asking some questions, trying to figure out some things, perhaps from a different perspective because of your background in education, and you're not finding the answers you're looking for. What were some of those questions that you were asking that you weren't getting the answers for? And were they different than the typical family that would be going through this same thing?
Sure. So I worked in oncology a lot. And in oncology, you have medical guidelines. And these are usually, detailed kind of protocols. If this, then that, and this, and that. You do this test, and then you match it up with this, right? And they're constantly evolving. You do clinical trials, and there's new drugs, and, which has better outcomes. And it's all quantifiable. There's different tests to take and everything. And with autism, the diagnosis, first off, is not based on any lab test, right? So you're kind of in this quandary of, okay, is it not? We're just making this diagnosis based upon observation, which is, as a chemist, that is unsettling, right? Before getting the diagnosis, what we did, and the reason why she was diagnosed later than probably she should have, is we went and eliminated all the other possibilities that it could be that had lab tests and different ways to measure it. So we were really thorough in that sense of eliminating. And then it was like, well, there's really nothing else left. So it's autism, and we're just making that diagnosis based on observation. So that's very different than other therapeutic areas where, you take any type of test and then it comes, oh, there's a lump, or, oh, this value is over this, that means this. There's none of that. So starting from the beginning, it was, uncomfortable because you don't have that granular data. So, okay, we have an observation. That means things aren't going well. Okay, so now what do we focus on? And it's just like, well, we don't know what's going wrong. We just know something is going wrong. So you can't really focus on anything, right? You're in this catch-22. So it became unsettling because I knew in other therapeutic areas, you're getting all these different options. You're getting all this information. And with autism, it wasn't there. So I think that was different specifically for me and my background in the sense of I knew what other therapeutic areas had and how well organized they were and
Sure.
just how thought out everything was. And with autism, it wasn't there. So it wasn't the fault of the doctors, but it was, okay, well, you have the diagnosis. We just don't know what really to do specifically.
Sure.
So there's this gap kind of between observations of behavior and then maybe looking at biochemical indicators.
Correct.
So you're trying to kind of bridge that gap, if you will.
Well, what I did was first for my daughter, I had to understand, and this was a little bit of an ebb and flow because I've been doing this for so long. It was, okay, let me understand what the possibilities are. Let me look at the science, right? So we have diet, and what do you have in diet? You have, gluten-free, you have dairy-free, you have sugar, right? You have then all these different beneficial vegetables and fruit, but they're not always beneficial for everyone, right? So there's different foods. You can think of nightshades, right? They can cause different reactions. Then you could even think about food allergies, right? So sometimes a kid will eat something and you'll see a kind of behavior and that gets labeled as autism, but is it really a food allergy? And then, okay, how do food allergies start? How did that happen, right? So you're back to the immune system, right?
Yeah.
And so then you're back to the gut of, okay, sometimes when there is increased permeability, right, leaky gut, then that is what causes that allergic reaction to the food. So these are all the different possibilities of what someone can do. And that's why you want to start looping in tests as much as possible. So you can do genetic tests to understand sensitivity to gluten. You can do different stool tests to understand inflammation of your gut. You can do different urine tests to understand different gut infections, right? So you can start to loop in that information. But the thing is, this is not based on some standardized medical guidelines. And autism to this day still has this gap of what's in PubMed, what's been published, what are doctors discussing at conferences, and then really what is practiced and what is written down, and how can a parent look at that and then start to ask questions like, oh, my child should do this, my child should do that. So there still is that gap, unfortunately, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But I think that gap is still there because people are trying to explain all of autism with like a few things. And I don't think that's going to happen.
In the past couple of years, that the pop culture term neurodivergent has come out, right? And this refers to, I don't know, basically individuals whose brains might function differently from the typical person. And
whatever that means.
Autism, ADHD, right? Dyslexia. So there's this social aspect that we're trying to do this, right? So people now are identifying as, I'm neurodivergent. I'm somewhere in this world. I don't know what that means, right? But it's somewhere there. And then we're identifying other people as neurotypical. We go then to like the DSM-5, right? And the criteria for autism is going to be different than what people are talking about in pop culture. When we're talking about autism today, how are we defining autism? Because it's different than how we defined it maybe a generation ago.
So the autism that I'm talking about is official diagnosis made by a professional who is trained. So I'm talking about, pediatric neurologists, developmental pediatricians. Your general pediatrician is not allowed to make an autism diagnosis.
Yeah.
They can recognize red flags. They can refer out to specialists. And the reason why is because they're not trained. And especially because it's based on observation, you really want to get your child in front of someone who this is the only thing they do, right?
Yes.
All day they're looking at autism. So whenever I'm talking about autism, it's the medical diagnosis. Now, what has happened over the years is you've had Asperger's get folded into an autism diagnosis. So Asperger's as a diagnosis does not exist anymore. So you have these different levels. And there's a lot of controversy with these levels, right? Because you'll have one end of the spectrum, which is profound autism. So someone who might not ever speak, Maybe they have reliable communication or not, in the sense of spelling or an iPad or something along those lines. They might not be able to dress themselves, ever have a job. They might need 24/7 care because of, let's say, meltdowns or aggressive behaviors. So that is one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have someone who can dress themselves, walk across the street, get a driver's license, maybe hold a job, maybe not. That might be where things start to become difficult. They might be able to speak, but not really have a conversation, a back and forth conversation. And so what happens is many people on one side of the spectrum say this is more of an identity. I'm neurodivergent. This is just who I am, right?
Yeah.
Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, those parents and some of those individuals themselves will say, no, this is not an identity. This is a diagnosis. I don't want to headbang. I don't want to, like, I would love to speak. I can't speak. So this is where it gets very controversial, right? When you're trying to even come up with those guidelines, right? Because you'll have some people who will say, hey, no, we don't want to change anything about ourselves, right? So it comes from when someone takes a diagnosis as an identity and not really keep to the true sense of a diagnosis. And you'll have other people who will say, yes, like, I want my child to be able to speak, right? They can't speak at all. I want them. Why are they not able to? And so this is where the controversy comes from. So it just gets autism gets so complicated because it's encompassing so much. So you can start to think, like, will there ever be one medical guideline for all of autism? No, right? And you don't even know, okay, where should I start? Because if I start talking about some things that people think are an identity, right? Like, I don't have conversations well. I don't do back and forth. I like to talk about only what I want to talk about. Some people might take that aspect of autism and embrace that as their identity. Totally fine. If that's what you want to do, you take the information about an autism diagnosis and you say, this is just who I am. But then you shouldn't really force your view onto others. And then that's where the controversy comes from. And you'll have infighting between autism as to what should be done. And so then obviously that starts to scare away different people, pharma and scientists and things like that.
One of the questions, and mine is going to be, we got to dumb this down a little bit for my brain. And I'm going to ask this question, and I'm probably going to offend, so I apologize. But I need help in understanding the scope of all of this. As you're going through this, not only personally, but obviously then turn it into, the passion and the intrigue and all of that stuff into a career. When you talk about autism specifically, as you're going through the science, you're trying to work with gut health and trying to figure out how the brain works and all those. Are you trying to understand it? Are you trying to get rid of it? Are you trying to adapt to it? Like, and I, again, if that comes off rude, I apologize. But like, as you go through this, what is your desired outcome of this work, right? Is it just to educate the general public? Is it to get doctors to think differently? Is it to, part of the stats that I looked up is that 40% of the diagnoses disappear over time. And like, you've come up and discovered some of that. So what are you working towards, or what aspects of this are you working towards in the science field?
Sure. So none of this as a career was my idea.
Right.
So let me just put that out there. This was nothing I planned. So the way it started was my daughter gets the diagnosis. I'm like, all right, what do we do? I don't get good answers. So then I say, all right, well, let me start looking, right? I have that skill. Let me just very quickly, I can come up to speed. And that's when I ran into that first publication of 10%. So when my daughter was diagnosed, it was 10% of kids with an autism diagnosis lose that diagnosis and they go on to live a life of doing whatever they want, right? So they don't need occupational therapy or physical therapy or speech therapy or supports at school. So it was like 10%. Okay, so I call up the scientists who did that publication. Tell me, what do you mean by optimal outcome? What is this? Right? So I start asking questions and they're telling me, like, these kids' bodies who are not able to function in certain way, right? When you can't speech, right? Like the body just can't do it. But now all of a sudden for, 10% of the kids, it's not a problem. So my perspective became, let me understand what's going on with my daughter's body that is preventing her from doing what she wants. And that was the perspective. So let me understand the biology and let me see what I can do to help that biology, right? So if I was giving her something to eat that was causing inflammation, obviously that's not something I want to do, right? So I didn't know all these different things. And as my daughter started to improve, it was doctors who encouraged me to, they're like, you need to start a blog, you need to write a book, you really need to get out there and educate, because that in many ways, when I would have different doctor's appointments, it would be dialogue back and forth. I didn't go in there as my daughter's mom, right? I went in there as Dr. Lyons, and I would have like a colleague type conversation about, okay, what's going on with autism research? What are we doing here? And so it was a lot more back and forth, and I was able to ask these better questions and get better care, right? And so then that is like, all right, I'll educate other people to do that, right? It wasn't my idea. I was like, okay. And then, I start a blog, and okay, that starts picking up in popularity. And then someone's like, oh, you should do a YouTube video. And so now I've had a YouTube channel for over 10 years, just taking a scientific publication and breaking it down as to what is the science, who is this meaningful for? Because that's a really important filter for parents to have, autism parents to have, in the sense of, does this apply to my child? Because it doesn't,
right,
for everyone. And that's something you just have to accept with autism, is that the parent has to become very, very good at filtering out what is relevant for their child and what is not, because you'll waste a lot of time on stuff that doesn't make a difference. So that's really my goal, in the sense of, let me bring light to this science that will just stay in PubMed otherwise, or it will just stay in the minds of some really smart doctors who are working on this. Let me bring it out to the public as much as possible, make it accessible, and then help parents get an impact on their child, because that's ultimately what we want. So it's about education, but then also implementation.
So yeah, it's all three, right? So I asked, but it is, it's under, there may be some improvement in the quality of life, or improvement in abilities and things of that nature due to some of the work that's happening. But it may also be how the families work with that and adapt to it and do different things. And it might also be just general understanding of how this is progressing, even over the last 10 years or so, how this is continuing. So it's all of it. It's not just one. Okay.
Yeah.
That what you're talking about, reading some documentations on PubMed and then being able to talk about it where people like Drew and I can understand it, that's a skill set. That's a skill set. Where did that come from for you? I don't know, because where I'm going with this is that there's something about understanding how people listen, and how we can take things and make them really connect with other people. That is a great skill set to have, and that's kind of sounds like what you're doing with being able to filter these things out and give these resources to people. Where did that skill set come from for you when it comes from reading something on PubMed to explaining it to someone like Drew and I?
So I think it came from grad school. When you're asking this question, I've not really thought about this much, but immediately what came to mind was my advisor at Yale. He was a very quiet and almost like shy person if you interact with him. But then when he would give presentations, he made everything really understandable and relatable and funny. And I saw how people would get interested, way more interested than if you just did it kind of
by the book, right?
Without yeah. And it was interesting to watch him get this other persona, because that was not the persona you really interacted with on the daily basis. And so I just saw how much more people leaned in and found certain things interesting, and they just wanted to learn more. If it was accessible. And so if you really know what you're talking about, you can take these high level concepts and then just make sure that the conversation fits whatever level you're talking to. And it is a skill, right? Because you're translating basically like science to
Yeah.
English, right?
Yes.
And also to be able to enjoy that connection. So you can see in someone's eyes when they're like, oh, I get that. Yeah, that makes sense. And you have to enjoy that. I happen to enjoy that. I don't get to see that when people watch my YouTube videos. Obviously, they leave comments and stuff like that. But I definitely do like that when people have that moment of, oh, that makes sense. Okay.
That connects to, in so many ways, that connects to why Brant and I do this. And what's interesting about our take in this podcast, in this world that we're living in right now, is the skill of listening, I think, can be argued pretty straightforward that it's fading away. The skill of talking is taking over. So we wanted to combat that a little bit. And the whole purpose of this podcast is that if people do a little bit better job at listening, perhaps the world will be a better place. So what we wanted to do is take as many topics that exist in this world and how does listening play a role in it. And I think this is directly tied into what Brant is kind of transitioning to in your experience in doing all of this. You just talked about grad school, which preceded all of this, right? But you could kind of dig back into some of these things. Talk to us about your path through the last 10 to 15 years, and how has listening in your mind or in your experience, how has listening evolved with you down this path that you're on now, from 10 years ago to I need to go sit down and talk to a doctor about this, to now I'm helping families all over the world go through this?
So listening is important when you're trying to create collaborations. Teams do better than individuals, for the most part, right? You can achieve much more with people around you. And I definitely knew that going into a doctor's appointment, right? So I would make an agenda. I would have, the points that I wanted to discuss. I would make sure I put, what would the doctor want to know so that they could have everything, send it to them the day before, just so that I could, in many ways, be ready to listen, right? So I planned out what I wanted to talk about. I put it on paper. I sent it over to them. Hopefully they would read it. Usually very good doctors think about the day before, the next day at the end of their day. So like around 5 o'clock, they're looking through, okay, who am I meeting tomorrow? What do I got to think about, right? So that was when, okay, let me get my agenda there. So doctors are thinking so that we could have this really good conversation. So that definitely was something in the beginning of, I need to ask them these questions and then listen to the answers. And that was really important. And then I applied that also to interactions with school. So becoming an advocate, I didn't even know I became an advocate until, I don't know, I caught myself advocating without having to think about it. And I was like, oh, okay, I became an advocate.
I did it. What'd you do today? Oh, I became an advocate today. Oh, cool. It's just a Tuesday.
It was that moment of realization. Yep.
Look at me.
I'm an advocate. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So those are all those skills. Like if you really want to work well with a school or a daycare or a nanny or a babysitter or a different therapist, right? You've got to figure out, okay, what is it that I want? And then how do we get there? And you can't just bulldoze people. It just doesn't work. I wish it did. I wish I was one of those people who could just like yell. You see it in the movies. They yell and everything like works out. That doesn't, every once in a while I'll yell and nothing works out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
You don't hear about the over-aggressive listener very often.
Right. But that is the quiet, that I think is a very underrated skill. And I think when people are good listeners, you'll hear compliments like, that person just sees me, right? Like there's different compliments you get when you are a good listener. And I think there's different accomplishments that happen, right? On a team when you have people who listen to each other and then they kind of like build off each other, right? You've all been in meetings where you have that synergy of, okay, someone says a problem and they're like, well, what about, if we look at it this way? And everyone's like, And okay, what about this? And you get that like moment or two to like just let it settle. And that that is good listening. So I think it can happen, but you have to be able to slow things down, right? And in today's world, we're all about, oh, let's just get whatever has to be done. So there are definitely different aspects to good listening. And I think once you just need to do it a few times, and then when you see the result, that's the
Yep.
feedback of like, wow, we're doing things I never thought we would do. And why is that? Oh, because we're functioning as a team. And okay, what really helps someone be on a team? Yes, you have to have leadership, but you have to have respect and listening to different people's perspectives.
The two different dynamics you talked about there were like the doctor to patient conversation and listening there, and then also interactions with school. When it comes to doctor-patient relationships, I know for me as a patient, sometimes going into the doctor, I'll be like, no, this is what I've got. This is what it is. I've already got my mind made up. I'm not listening to the doctor. I just want them to give me what I want. I can be
And how does that go?
It doesn't go well. It doesn't go well. But what are some tips for someone like me that you're like, no, that's not how this works. Like to really listen to the doctor, because sometimes I don't want to hear the hard truth, right? I don't maybe want to hear that I shouldn't be eating that much really cheesy good pizza. But what are some tips or techniques when it comes to really, I don't know, listening to the medical provider and really working with them?
Yeah, the best way to go about it is to ask questions and respectful questions. Sometimes when you're in the moment and you say questions fast, sometimes then the doctor gets a little like off balance because they're in a rush, right? On average, I think you get 7 minutes with a doctor for conventional medicine. Now, when you deal with functional medicine or you're paying out of pocket, you can get 30 minutes, an hour and a half, right? Like there's different doctors that you want on your team. But if you're dealing with conventional medicine with a doctor who has a very short time with you, you would want to ask those questions in the most non-accusatory general way. And I also like to kind of think about things as like jiggling. So sometimes I'll ask a question that is a little bit on the outside of what my topic is. So if your topic is a high cholesterol and pizza, right, then you might start to ask a question maybe about exercise, right? Or, like, what do you really want that answer to be? What expertise are you looking for that doctor to give you? Is it something non-pharmaceutical related, right? Are you looking for something that will solve the problem but not be a prescription? Then that's the kind of like jiggling you want to do over here to kind of get the mind thinking in the frame that you want. So there's lots of different ways, but definitely why is a lot. I try and stay away from that word because it triggers a lot of times that child thinking in us, right? Because we all can go back to when we were a kid and our mom or dad was like, why did you do that? Right. And then you just are like, right. And you start getting really defensive and now everything is shutting down, right? You're not in creative mode. You're just like deflecting and stuff like that. I try to use how come instead of why. Why still will fly out of my mouth at times. And I always regret it. I'm like, oh, because you can see the impact. Again, that goes to the listening. When you use a particular word, what is the impact on it? I know the difference between why and how come. And it's just having that kind of mindfulness when you're going in and you want information from someone. You've got to be able to like create that container that is safe and creative and it can get you an answer that you're looking for. So that's how I would handle doctors.
So yeah, it's that really approaching with that non-accusatory approach, knowing you've got that like 7 minute window where it's a short period of time. I like the jiggling, like where you're just like, I'm going to test this out over here and see if I can make any movement and then go a little farther with it if it works. And then the other one I like to is, stay away from why, but maybe ask how come. Yeah. It's really looking at, hey, I'm with you on this. I'm not trying to push against you. Yeah.
Right. And asking, what are your other options?
Yeah.
Like just presenting it like that, not like so much yes, no, right? Because then it gets shut down.
Well, and I think that it ties directly back to you're probably not going into this situation calm, collected, relaxed, right? You probably have, especially early on, you probably have a lot more questions. The way you described it going into it is more of a collaborative nature. I'm working with you helps open up your eyes a little bit more. Like, we need to work through this together versus I need you to give me answers, right? We're going into this together. You talked about planning ahead. So if you can plan ahead, that can help drop some of that anxiety, right? Because you're being action oriented, you're looking for these outcomes. You can start to be a little bit more solution driven, working through those things. I'm going to send them lists of my questions, so we can maximize this time. You talked about the timing of it all. You talked about the feedback. So I think all those things tie into a lot of the work and a lot of the conversations that Brant and I have in general about the importance of listening, but also practicing and getting good at it, right? And always, as soon as you figure out that you're the best listener in the world, you're probably the worst listener in the world. That sort of, right? You're on this journey. We're all on this journey forever. You'll get it figured out on your last day.
And listening, I have to say, is also listening to nonverbal. That's super important. Every once in a while, I'll say something. My daughter and I were having a conversation about this, about like rudeness. What is rudeness? She was calling me rude, and I was like, I'm not rude. And so, like, we had this long discussion. It was really good. Every once in a while, I will say something that is not rude, but it's like putting your foot in your mouth, right? But you don't mean it, but there's like, and I couldn't even come up with a good word. I was like, maybe insensitive, but that's not it because it's not intentional. And so every once in a while, I will. Like, I caught myself this week, and then when she came home from school, I was like, all right, you're right. I'm not rude. I'm not going to say I'm rude, but I did notice I put my foot in my mouth. That's the only way I could describe it. And I could see, like, I could hear almost the person being like, wait, what? Like, what, this doesn't make sense. Like, it just was a little jarring. So listening is, yes, what's coming back. So the answers for the doctor, but like, if you're in the doctor's appointment and let's say why comes out, why are you recommending that, right? You could listen to either what the doctor says, which maybe they're very well practiced and they keep their cool, but you might see them kind of like, flinch a little bit. And so then collaboratively, that's when you could be like, oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I just said that. It sounded much nicer in my head. I didn't mean it like that. Right. So that's another way to collaborate when you say something and you can hear the response either verbally from them or like physically, non-verbally, then that's also another opportunity to step in and show, okay, you're listening to everything. And that I will have to credit my daughter with teaching me.
Yeah, they do that every once in a while.
Kids are good at that. Yeah, there's other signs besides just what the words are saying, but the tone they're using it in, the body language you're using, those nonverbal cues, a huge part of it. I want to transition into looking at listening when it comes to autism. So you've in the past worked with parents and working with supporting their kids. What are you talking with parents about or caregivers about when it comes to listening in autism with their kids?
So I say all the time, their kids are listening to them, everything. And so with autism, when speech and communication is difficult, many people just assume, oh, they're not learning. They're not listening. And what happens is many kids just get ignored. They're in the room and parents or caregivers or teachers or, people are having conversation as if they weren't even there, because you just get this assumption of, oh, well, they can't understand. They're not listening, right? There are kids who are stimming and playing on their iPad and across the room, and you think they're not listening. Oh no, they are listening. And I explain this to parents because so many times I've worked with parents. There's been different health challenges. We resolve them using science, lab testing, building a great healthcare team, right? Having a good strategy and execution. And then their child changes. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait, how did they know that? How did they know about, my friend from college that I would only talk about on the phone? Oh, because they were listening, and you didn't think they
Yeah.
were listening, right? How did they know how to speak another language? Right? That has happened where a child who wasn't speaking, all of a sudden, when you resolve certain things, they can speak more than one language. That's because more than one language is spoken at home, right? So they're learning all along. They're listening. So I would say one of the biggest misconceptions about autism is it might appear that the child isn't listening or isn't able to listen or learn, and that is not true whatsoever.
I think when it comes to listening, oftentimes we're looking for those social cues and that feedback, right? Of making eye contact, nodding along when I'm listening, facing in the same direction that the listener is in. We might not be getting those things in those conversations, but this listening is still happening.
Yeah. And it's so easy to again, put a label of autism, and all of a sudden, expectations are decreased. Oh, they can't understand. They have autism. And it's not true whatsoever.
You talked earlier before about kind of being an advocate. So that awareness and that kind of knowing that, right, there's that misunderstanding there. What other things that, I don't know, we can do in regards of being an advocate when it comes to listening and autism?
Definitely presuming competence. That is something that many people talk about. And it's important. So as kids get healthier and then are able to communicate back, they show how competent they are. So you really want to presume that competence. In schools, a lot of times kids are not educated at the levels that they can actually learn just because there's different issues with communicating it back. So then it just becomes the assumption, oh, well, they can't learn. So just presuming competence and having respect for that person as a person, right? So don't talk about that person in front of them as if they aren't there, right? That gets very angering. And many times kids with autism then have these behaviors that all of a sudden it's like, oh, the behaviors are terrible, but it's in reaction to maybe being spoken about in a way that isn't favorable in front of them, right? And so then they are limited in how they might show their displeasure.
Sure.
And they might use behavior, and then we're just all saying, oh yeah, that child, they have autism, they can't behave well, right? But it's just really not fair in many ways.
What are things we can do to I don't know, just to help set up an environment for ourselves, but also for, someone with autism to help make sure we're having successful listening, successful communication?
It will vary for each person. You can always start off with something validating, saying, I know it might be difficult for you to communicate, but I know you hear me and I know you understand me.
Yeah.
So that might be the best way to start that kind of conversation. Sometimes people don't know how to interact with someone who has autism, right? Because it's always like, I don't want to scare them, but then you're ignoring them and I don't want to ignore them. And then the person just starts getting all tangled up inside. And then the person with autism can usually sense that, right? Or like, oh, and they might internalize it in the sense that, oh, this person doesn't want to be around me, right? Because we're all thinking from our own perspectives. So sometimes a general statement like that, when you don't know what to say, is the best way. And that's fine whether the child is like 2 or 20, right? That statement can be used. And then you can kind of personalize it from there, depending upon like their level of speech and, obviously their age.
What do we do to help, I don't know, and this is kind of veering off listening a little bit, but help people get past that stigma that's almost there, right? Of like, I don't know how to talk with this person. How do we push through that or push past that?
Well, no one likes to be wrong. I mean,
sure.
Me too.
Especially
right?
Brant.
And especially like
Brant
in social.
is really bad. Really bad at being told he's wrong. Yeah, oh man, you're the worst.
Am I? Oh, okay.
Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it. Different degrees, but nobody likes it. So in many ways, it's just getting comfortable with, okay, I might do the wrong thing. I might say the wrong thing, but let me at least show that I care, right? And so that would be that initial part. And many parents would be very appreciative because many times parents don't take their kids out and to places just because of this uncomfortableness. So even if you have a friend, or if you know someone who has a kid with autism, and they come to the parties, or they come to church, or they come to the classes or meetings, and their kid's never with them, you can always say something along those lines of, it'd be great to see your child, and now I might not know what to say. So if you give me any guidelines on what to do, that would be helpful. And the parent then will just be like, they still might not bring them, right? Because they might be wanting a break, right? So we never know what the other person is thinking. But having a conversation like that before the actual event, right? Or maybe you're going to a family party and there's a family member who has a child with autism, and like, I just don't. So you could just always send them a message. Is there anything I could do to, make sure your son feels welcomed?
Yeah.
Right? It's so easy. And then that's the listening, but you have to be able to ask that question and listen to what they say back and then act on it. But that's definitely another way to kind of get over that awkwardness. But also, you can't do the same thing for every child with autism. So you need some insight.
Yeah, you take that and we all go, oh, like you actually ask them how you can help, or you ask, be inquisitive, or like, it's like, well, no, yeah, I swear a lot. Sorry, but it's like, no shit. Like, but you can clam up and you can sit there and not know what to do. So I think that's really helpful as a reminder to just simply be kind, simply, be genuine and say, hey, what can I do to help make this more comfortable? What can I, those types of things takes folks a long way.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit in your journey in this of, everything from obviously the beginning and seeking this information, obviously having your background a little bit. The work that you've been doing over the last 10 years or so really focuses on supporting families. How you're going about doing that seems to have spidered off in a number of different ways, from dietary feedback and research to videos to blogs to books to travel to all of these things. What's next? Like what are you landing on? Are you going to continue to hit this in a kind of a multifaceted way, or do you see where do you see this going? What are your bigger goals with the work that you've been doing as you look down the road 5-10 years?
After working with parents for so long, I've been able to understand the different areas you need to have focus on. And so we've developed something called the Navigating Autism Matrix. So there's 7 categories. These are the things that parents really need to have front and center. And there's a lot to do in each of those categories. So you have to be able to take things like one step at a time. Let's not get overwhelmed. Take it one step at a time, make good decisions, see change, and keep going in those kind of directions and start to see synergy, right? So a child who maybe the gut infection clears up, then in school is able to sit a lot calmer and can start to learn, right? Which then might allow the parent to feel satisfied, right? And then they can focus more on their job. And so there's a lot that feeds into each other. And I've learned that over the years. And what we've done is we've built a platform for parents so that they can get that education. So they learn in those small chunks, and they start where they think they'll be successful, right? Not everyone wants to start with diet. I certainly didn't. There's different ways to get started. So it's not just one way of doing things. And then I've also put on that platform board certified health coaches, because one aspect that happens is parents, this is such a stressful situation that it's hard to maintain that determination and that effort all the way to completion. There's so many ups and downs, and you need that neutral resource, which for me was what I did for a lot of the parents that I worked with. Where it was like, all right, I don't have a vested interest in you using this versus that. I just want you to resolve whatever this issue is and, have your child smile and do things. So having that neutrality and helping someone sort things out as to what's best for them is important. So that's why we have the board certified health coaches there. And then we also have a functionality for parents to order the lab tests, these different functional medicine lab tests. And then we teach them what it actually means. And that's the real key. So when you get a lab test back and you see for the first time, items in red, right? It's like, oh, okay, so now I have a lab test that actually shows me something is not optimal in my child's body. Okay, let's focus on it. But you've got to understand the why, otherwise it's just surface. And you're like, okay, now I have another problem, right? So when you understand the why, then you can get so much more proactive and you get so much more determined and you're able to do things to completion. So this is all what we've incorporated onto something called the Navigating Autism platform. It is flexible spending approved, and that is my focus for the next 5 to 10 years, right? Of really growing that in a scalable way so that parents get this quality information, they get the support to take action, and they have a true understanding of, okay, why am I doing this? And that's really my focus for the next 5 years.
Nice.
That's awesome. I mean, just that the flexible spending approved, like that's not a small thing. Like that's that is a big thing. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
But what an awesome platform. I mean, I can only imagine where that's going to go. As you're talking, I'm thinking about, gosh, when it comes to health, like certified health coaches are great. And there's still so much we don't know about our immune system, about our microbiome, about our brain chemistry. Like there are so many things we don't know that it's cool to hear you kind of leaning into those a little bit and being like, okay, what are those indicators? What are those things we could be looking at and kind of keeping curious about that? It's I'm excited to see where this might go.
Thank you.
In that same breath, the journey from when you were first working with this to today, your words were this was not coming back via lab tests. This was coming back via observation. Do I hear you saying that we're starting to find a little bit more of a balance there of lab tests and observation?
Probably no, for a medical guideline that could apply to all of autism. There's more understanding of health from a functional medicine standpoint. So like when my daughter was diagnosed, constipation, okay, Miralax, right? That's the solution. You stop the Miralax, the constipation comes back. So, it's like, it's good for the short term, but not for the long term. I would say the main difference between now and back when my daughter was diagnosed is there's less resistance to looking at what these root cause issues are. So you don't have a medical guideline in the sense that an autism diagnosis could be made on these different lab tests, because a lot of times these functional medicine lab tests, if you don't address the problem, it results in the behavior, but you can't just say, okay, this gut infection caused the autism. It's a huge leap, right? And I think it'll be too far for anyone to make. The other thing, which I've been reading more and more and like staying abreast on, is MRIs and using AI to really understand different subtle changes. So for now, any MRI, a neurologist is not able to say, okay, this person's autistic and this person's not, based on an MRI. But they're starting to maybe see some little changes in the brain. But you have to use AI to get that large volume of data processed and then also to see the changes. So maybe something along those lines are in the works. And then there's also about eye contact. So they're using different AI to take video of a child and then really study where the eyes are. So, are they really looking completely away? Are they looking at the mouth? And using AI in that capacity. I think it'll be hard. It's just going to be really hard to have something that can explain all of autism.
I read about that study, and just in with that study and how they're saying, hey, this can be a pretty accurate predictor with that one study, and that it was really curious to hear about. Whoa, I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
And now, like, it also as a layman, like as a if I'm a parent and I read that, I might read it into it a little maybe too much, being like, oh, I need to get this done, or what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's got to be really hard for parents and folks to really navigate a lot of this stuff that we're seeing out there.
Yeah, that's why the lens I talked about, the autism parent lens, has to be, okay, I hear this, and then does that apply to my child? Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes yes, and sometimes no. But it is hard emotionally, because you're like, I just want to try it, because what if it does work? Right.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty with autism, because it is just so nebulous that it can still hit there and be like, oh, okay, right. Whereas in other therapeutic areas, we might hear something and it would be like, oh, that doesn't work for breast cancer. No, right. So you can certainly write off certain things easier. But with an autism diagnosis, like, it could work, right? And then you're starting to spend time, energy, and effort on having hope with no basis or grounding. So that's why I really recommend doing different functional medicine tests, so that you have something grounded in science. Like, this is our focus. This is what we're going to do. And then we're going to measure it again, and we're going to see what has changed. That's really the important aspect.
That's great. Dr. Lyons, so first off, thank you for all of your time and enlightening me and Brant, and ultimately we'll be enlightening our listeners around the world about this sort of thing. That you want them, if they remembered one thing from this episode, you want to make sure that you emphasize it and that they take it away.
I would say for them to think about a time when their child did something and they thought, oh, there's more in there, and to just follow that.
Awesome.
That's great.
I appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time. It's really nice to meet you.
Thank you again for taking the time to sit with us and talk with us about your work, your journey, and what you're doing to help folks who are experiencing autism and are looking to just live a successful life with that. I'm excited to see what you're doing. I'm also excited to see what you will be doing coming down the road.
For sure.
So a lot of good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
In the description of this podcast, you will find more information and a list of any of the sources that we used.
This podcast is created and produced by Drew Richmond and Brant Christofferson, editing by me, and the I'm Listening theme music by Drew.
That's me.
That's you.
Brant, I will talk to you later, my friend.
We'll see you next time.
Yeehaw.
Have a good one, Drew.
Bye, Brant. Now, we need to do a little YouTube thing.
Oh, yeah. Hello, YouTubes.
This is new. We weren't doing nothing over the last 6 months, folks, since season 4 and the kickoff of season 5. We were working on the tubes. The YouTube. Your tubes. Is that how it is? It's you on the YouTube. No, that's gross.
Tied my tubes?
No. Stop that. That's disgusting. We're on YouTube.
Yeah, we've been on YouTube all along. We are now dabbling with posting videos? ?
Yeah, some additional content. So go to YouTube, in the search bar, find I'm_listening podcast. Find it with our logo and make sure you click on it and subscribe. We would love to get subscribers. And then one of the only podcasts in the world that's dedicated to the skill of listening can continue to rise up in its popularity, because we believe that if everybody listened just a little bit more, the world would be a better place. Find us, I'm_listening podcast. Click on it and subscribe.